A candidate in Ecuador's presidential election has been shot dead after a campaign event in the capital, Quito. 9 others were hurt in the attack on Fernando Villavicencio. He was a member of Congress and a former journalist. He was flanked by security as he left the rally. He made his way through the crowd and got into a car. Then there was a burst of gunfire. The suspected attacker is reported to have died in a shootout with police. Mr. Villavicencio was not the frontrunner for the month election, but he has been vocal about tackling corruption, environmental destruction and Ecuador's growing security problems.
We experienced a horror movie. 30, 40 shots were fired with machine guns, and we saw the wounded fall. I know there are some dead, and sadly Fernando Villavicencio was assassinated. This murder. We do not understand where the police were, where the police protection was, knowing that Fernando had a 96% danger of threats and even more in the last few days, he was threatened by this criminal group. I don't understand where the police were to protect the life of Fernandez and of those of us who were there.
Ecuador's President Guillermo Lasso has declared a state of emergency, saying the killing would not go unpunished, and suggested organized crime was to blame, but he confirmed the elections would still go ahead in 10 days' time.
Faced with the loss of a Democrat and a fighter, the elections aren't suspended. On the contrary, they have to be held and democracy has to be strengthened. This is a political crime that acquires a terrorist character, and we don't doubt that this assassination is an attempt to sabotage the electoral process.
All right, special correspondent Karl Bostic joins me now live from London for more on this. Karl, can you give us more details about this attack and what the reaction has been to the killing?
That's right. This is really being called a turning point in Ecuador's history. It's a very peaceful country. There have never been political killings before until actually 1 month ago. Portuguese Manta was assassinated, but this is the first time a presidential candidate has been assassinated. There have been assassinations of presidential candidates in Colombia and Mexico before, but never Ecuador. So it's a real shockwave, if you will. He was at a campaign rally at a high school in Quito. That's the capital. And after his speech, he was going out to his escort vehicle at the rear of the school, where throngs of supporters were waiting for him. And you saw the video of him getting into the car. You heard shots of what people thought at first were firecrackers. But instead, he was shot at close range multiple times in the head and pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. He was one of 8 candidates for the presidential election. First round for voting scheduled for October 20th, as you mentioned. He was polling around among the candidates. However, he was perhaps the most vocal candidate calling for a crackdown on drug trafficking, a crackdown on corruption between organized crime and the government. And that's why you had responses, for example, coming from a former president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, saying, is not only a political crime, Ecuador has become a failed state. His widow saying, where was the security? The security that was hired to protect him, they failed us. The logistics that was meant to protect him, they failed them. She said, this company is going to hell. But meanwhile, the response was international, from the Organization of American States, calling OAS, as it's known in Latin America, calling for increased security for the remaining presidential candidates. In fact, 3 of them, Suleiman, of the 8, they've suspended their campaign for the next few days. You also have responses from the White House saying that they not only condemn it, they're calling for a speedy and transparent investigation. There is also condemnation and condolences coming from Europe, from Spain, for example. Also as far away as China, where they're saying that they hope these elections can still proceed in a stable way and in a smooth way. And of course, the neighboring, such as Colombia, also condemning it. So this is a real shockwave, though, for a country which has never, ever experienced this kind of violence before.
Well, shock and unprecedented, Karl, as you put it. But again, people will want to know what could be driving such violent attacks like this in Ecuador.
Sulaiman is very simple. It's just an increased surging demand globally for illegal drugs, namely cocaine, Sulaiman. And Ecuador, if you look at the map, it's wedged between Colombia and Peru, the world's two biggest cocaine producers. Nothing ever changed about Ecuador as a transit point for shipment of cocaine to the rest of the world. However, because of improved production and cultivating techniques, Sulaiman, production of cocaine has now increased by 35% because of these new improved techniques, mainly from. So as a result, Ecuador has become like a gold rush place because now Guayaquil, one of their main ports, that's where a lot of the cocaine is shipped. To give an example of how lucrative it is, it's worth about 110 to 130 billion dollars a year. About 4/5 or 80% of that cocaine trade going to North America, even going to Europe. In other words, we're talking ranging from college campuses in the U.S. to nightclubs in Europe, including Italy. And what's happened is that this has become a magnet for international organized crime. Some of Mexico's biggest cartels now have bases in even as far away as the Balkans, Albania especially, the Albanian mafia. They have a base in Ecuador. And what was happening was that here you had this candidate, actually calling for a crackdown on this. In fact, he said on national TV a few days ago that he'd received death threats against him. So to stop naming the head of the local crime syndicate, who actually was behind bars, the Los Choneros, one of the biggest crime syndicates in Ecuador. Its head called Fito. He's already behind bars, and he received his campaign received two messages to stop saying his name, or else his campaign would be broken. Exactly what happened, being taken down. In fact, he had called amongst his campaign pledges to build a new maximum security prison that would isolate organized crime leaders like this person, Fito. And so that was the threat that he posed to organized crime, but it's because of the increased surge and demand for cocaine that we're seeing. There's one quick note about just how caught off guard Ecuador is by this. Each month in Guayaquil, that main port city, 300,000 containers go out of Ecuador, shipped to North America, shipped to Europe. 300,000. Only 20% of them are screened, and many of those containers, cocaine, hidden in boxes and crates of bananas, also wooden pallets, and false floor bottoms. That's how the cocaine is shipped, and they're not detected. And meanwhile, you have a record wave of killings, about 3,500 in the first 6 months. Almost the total of last year is spiraling out of control. That's what we're seeing right now, and it's uncontrollable.
Let's close on this, because in the meantime, the president has said elections will go on in 10 days' time. So how will this affect that election?
Well, that's correct. There will be a chilling effect because amongst nationally, the OAS, Organization of American States, was calling for stepped up increased security of all the presidential candidates. The state of emergency also includes the presence of military, of the army, not only in the streets, but at polling stations, so that it can be conducted on time. And again, this is only the first round. The final or second round, if it's necessary, would be, for example. But nonetheless, if this wasn't sabotage, it's going to have a chilling effect, because what's happening is that you've got the prisons, which are effectively the basis for these gang organizations. You've got daily reports of public killings in the streets of Ecuador, school children gunned down, beheaded, even young men being hung from bridges. So the violence is really out of control. And this killing also sends a message that anyone is a target, especially if they're a presidential candidate.
Karl Bostic, many thanks for your time.